Let's get Zelly on. She has been so patient with us. Pronouns are she, her, calling in from Georgia. And Zelly wants to talk about demisexuality and identity. Thank you for your patience. You are live on Secular Sexuality.
Yes, hello, Christy, Nate, and Jason, and it's Zoe, not Zelly. And
Zoe.
Jason, we've talked many times. Yes, that is I, and that is us.
That
right.
is us.
We're a trans woman, and we also have a dissociative disorder. So if I switch from singular to plural pronouns, that's what's going on there. But identity itself is something that we really like to talk about. There's a lot of aspects of like sexuality, gender, that sort of thing. And one of the fascinating aspects of that is like sometimes people say, well, how do I know I'm gay, or how do I know I'm trans, or something like that? And we kind of define identity for others as saying like, just think of what your thoughts, your feelings, your perceptions, and your memories essentially are what most people mean when they say I in that sense.
Sure.
And then your sexuality is one facet of that. And that would be on a sliding scale, like a spectrum. And then we explore that throughout our lives, like from the times that we're, first going into puberty, and then like in your 20s and that sort of thing. As you're moving through life, this is constantly developing, and it's different for like every person. And that's why like we always try to point out to people, like there is no one way to know for sure that you have some specific identity. It's not like, oh, I did this one thing and now I'm trans, or I did this one thing and now this makes me gay. You can just have the identity, but it's also good to know what you're exploring as well, and kind of what direction you're moving in and what you're comfortable with. And as far as demisexuality, go ahead.
Oh, I was really just going to say that I think you're talking about some important ideas when we get into like consciousness and who is I and what does that actually mean and how do I figure out my identity. And these are questions that we spent a good amount of time on in an episode last summer that I'll make sure is in the show notes for this one, because it was a really good time, and I love a good naval contemplation about identity and about consciousness and these kinds of things. But yeah, tell me how this idea helps you to explore or understand your demisexuality.
So as far as demisexuality goes, like we realized pretty early on that it seemed like there wasn't really, we're not physically attracted to people in the traditional way that somebody looks at someone and say like, oh, they're beautiful, they're gorgeous, or like that, it makes me like wet or something. Instead, we would have to get to know somebody and essentially become like friends with them. And we are attracted to people's like personalities, essentially. And it's like the closer friends we are with somebody, the more we could be intimate with them. But one of the reasons why we tie identity to sexuality so much is like having a dissociative disorder, not all of our various identities share the same sexuality. So having to explore that process over and over and try and work through like, okay, well, what does make us this way? Like when we call ourselves like demisexual or like panromantic, what does that mean? And I feel like a lot of times, especially when people talk about asexuality or just being asexual, a lot of people just imagine that as like, oh, well, you're just not sexually attracted to people in the traditional way. And while that's fair, I would say like, there is a gray spectrum as well. All of sexuality seems like it's on a spectrum of some type, and it's where do you fit in there? And a lot of people seem to be confused when we talk about like having no sexual attraction to somebody unless we're friends with them or get to know them, like their personality first. But for some reason, that's always been that way for us. And even in like our teens, when we were going through counseling and therapy, one of the most damaging things to us was we had a therapist try to tell us that there was something wrong with us for having a sexuality like that. They specifically said that there's, something wrong with us if we don't find people attractive. Like we can't look at someone and say like, oh, I understand this person is like sexually attractive. They're just not. We have to get to know them first. And that's pretty much our primary experience with it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you bringing your unique perspective here. You're right. When we're talking about sexuality, but really kind of all human behavior, we are looking at spectrums on top of spectrums. I mean, basically, it's spectrums all the way down as we become more and more individual and more specific. And all of those spectrums slide and flow and have a fluidity to them. So I can appreciate why the Tucker Carlsons of the world want to futz their face and become frustrated about these conversations. But Zoe, I really appreciate that we can just all acknowledge that we are different human beings, and the exploration of the self is a beautiful thing.
Oh, and I would say, I guess a lot of people complain about labels, and they'll say everything has to have a box, and this is all like some part of like an agenda or something like that. And what I push back on that with is I would say that labels are just shorthand to summarize and experiences that you're trying to relay to somebody, or to let them know that you have a specific set of interests, or there is this part of you. And that even if we don't necessarily label ourselves and we say like we're just going to be in the questioning area of like LGBTQ, I would say that it's fine to be in that questioning area. And even if you don't ever adopt a label, it's okay to explore these areas and hopefully find yourself while doing so, because that's the only way that humans, that's the only way you can know this about yourself, is through exploring and having those experiences. There is no like gold standard to determine what makes you straight, gay, whatever else.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, Zoe, that it is so frustrating when simple minds prefer simple answers. And that's what it seems like it is with the Tucker Carlsons of the world, because I can totally relate to what you're saying, because I myself have sort of flirted with the labels of gay and bi over the years. And I've sort of come to the conclusion that I don't really care which one people use, because I'm a monogamous person who's found their forever human. So I don't, it just doesn't really matter to me. But I totally can relate with how frustrating that can be. Jason, what did you have to say?
I think Zoe, you and I have even talked about this concerning the label pan or versus bi, and I feel like I'll use the term bi just because it's quicker and a little bit easier. Like for me, the term atheist I use because it's a little quicker and easier. I definitely view myself more as an atheist, but atheist is a little more understandable, a little quicker, still kind of carries the same connotation. So I do understand that, because whenever I look at my sexuality, like I'm monogamous, I'm currently with a cis female, but there's always there's stuff possibly open for the future, and I would be with anybody, and I have to admit that about myself. And I find my pornography collection, or not collection, nobody has a collection anymore, but my search history,
digital library.
My digital library is not.
You got a bookmarks folder, Jason. Don't lie.
Oh, I mean, well, I know exactly what I'm going to. I know the actors I enjoy, and sometimes it's two dudes, sometimes it's two dudes and a chick, sometimes it's 27 people, and I'm not really sure what's really going on, but it's great all together. So I agree. It's there's definitely like a fluid label thing, but I think labels can also help, because by me saying bi, it's a very quick differentiation between me and the heteronormative expectation that's placed on me within my society. So for me, that just helps with that, and it also helps to combine community. It helps to kind of understand where your allies are. It's like, okay, we share a very common thing and a common struggle, so I think labels can be useful in that point, but we also have to be willing to understand that they are fluid, just like the human experience.
Fair to say. I mean, Zoe, does that line up with your experience? There you go.
Yes. Thank y'all for taking our call, and hope y'all have a wonderful night and everybody finds lots of orgasms.
I will.
Thank you so much.